Hello guys, today I am looking at Resident Evil 5. This game, I love this game. This is definitely one of the, I'm not sure if I should say classics, but definitely one of my favorite games of the 7th gen for a few reasons. First of all, this is one of the few times that survival horror games introduced a co-op mode, and so a lot of my memories from this game actually involve me and my brother playing together and just trying to survive together. It's very interesting how it works. You essentially share an inventory at the beginning of a mission, and then you eventually kind of come together to basically, fight and get, materials and stuff. And it was so interesting to see a game fully dedicated around a two-player experience. And so basically everything works more or less like Resident Evil 4. If you shoot the enemy, you'll stun them. You can go for a close quarter attack. Again, to me, I'm just still so impressed that this game was able to handle two players in the same environment throughout the entire campaign. It was just so much fun. I can't really understate it. And I know a lot of people don't have very positive opinions about this game. I'm not sure why. Maybe because essentially it was the same thing as Resident Evil 4, and it was felt a little bit more derivative. But I felt this had a great campaign, great bosses and whatever, and the co-op mode I thought really helped. There's other cool things. You can obviously get different kinds of weapons. You can lock alt costumes for, beating the game and doing kinds of other things. I would also have to say that I think this game also has the best mercenary mode, because I believe that is also co-op itself. I thought the Mercenaries was really, really the best in this game. And honestly, if I'm speaking frankly, the best Mercenaries mode I did experience was actually in Resident Evil Revelations of all games. However, that's a very different mercenary mode where it's very much tiered, and you get different kind of unlockables, different kinds of weapons, a lot of different variety of different things, and like upgrades and like different loadouts and all this stuff. Well, this one is very simple. There are different loadouts depending on the character you play as. However, it's pretty much always the same kind of layout in terms of where the level up things are, or the time extenders, or the special kinds of things around the map. It was, I don't know, there's just something really, really fun and really great about this game. Again, you still have the same red dot sight from Resident Evil 4 to negotiate around, and this time you are in Africa. So you will go from different locations, from, the plains, the desert kind of area, the village, to a swamp area. And the swamp area is actually very long. It has a little mini open world section where you're on a boat and you have to go in between 3 or 4 different islands, finding keys and stuff like that. Of course, you have the kind of military-esque part near the end where you have this giant facility you're going through, and has a really good soundtrack actually for that area, and this whole kind of factory and everything. And so similar to Resident Evil 4, it's not a parasite like Las Plagas this time, but I believe it's some kind of parasite or something similar to it, which is from like this ancient flower or something that's infected people. And I remember in 7, they decided to do mold. So they've kind of done almost every kind of weird parasite or biological entity, ever since the T-virus. So in this game, Chris has kind of joined the BSAA, which is this like new organization specifically dedicated to combating, biomutants and stuff like that. Chris himself is kind of the main character in this game, but you have a new partner called Sheva Alomar, who is part of the BSAA African branch, and so she's the main character that you usually spend most of your time co-oping with. So if you're playing co-op, things like will happen where your Sheva or whoever your partner is will get caught by a zombie. You can roundhouse kick the zombie away from them. You'll need to do certain puzzles together, and so if you're by a certain door, you need to like breach a room. You have to wait for your partner to show up. I'll be honest, some of the most frustrating parts of this game are definitely quick time events where both players have to do their share of inputs, and it's incredibly frustrating when someone doesn't do it. But yeah, those do exist. And so yeah, the story kind of starts with Chris tracking down a link to an Umbrella new virus that is being sold and experimented on in the black market in Africa. And so, of course, this entire village has been affected, and you have to gun your way through it and track down the supplier. And so this is very much similar to the kind of A route or A story of the Resident Evil series, where it's Wesker and Chris, and it's Leon and his own kind of adventures. So we're kind of back now to a more Chris-focused adventure. In fact, DLC for this game brings us back to, I think, part of one of the older Resident Evil games. I don't think it was... I think it was like I don't want to say if it's like Crystal Chronicles or something, but it's the one where you actually go after one of the Spencers on his island, and you have a little DLC where you play as Jill in that classic scene. And this is also another thing that I think, it's not a huge spoiler, but Jill is back in this game, but it's been a while since she's been seen, and she's been basically presumed missing, but she is back in this game in a very new, interesting, and different outfit. A really interesting character redesign for her. Another cool thing that's earned in this game rather than in Resident Evil 4 is, of course, now they have chapters and levels you can now select. So no longer are you restrained to doing one playthrough in one go, you can now choose different levels to go through. Of course, with HD graphics, things are much more realistic now and much more interesting looking. However, you will notice that Resident Evil 5 does suffer from the gray and brown and kind of yellowy filter that has been associated with 7th gen games that are very action-oriented. There are also vehicular sections of Resident Evil 5, which is, again, a very new thing where you'll be riding on motorcycles or jeeps. And there's a whole boss, which feels kind of a little bit janky, frankly, where you have to use your chain gun on a jeep and shoot it at the right times and know when to quote-unquote dodge and brace for impact when it hits you, and other things like that. Again, the horror elements are pretty much kept to the first couple chapters, then it just jumps into a full-on action movie kind of setting, really. And you have the classic settings like, the secret underground lab. The swamp is actually kind of cool. There are some pretty scary moments in the swamp where you have kind of this like tribal kind of setting where it's like, it's kind of like cannibal themed, and that's kind of interesting. Some of the bosses include, again, mutated wildlife like giant vampire bats or other kind of interesting animals. There's a side character who basically is the smuggler and drug dealer for, these mutant viruses, who, has this whiny, New York, New Jersey accent, and he's kind of a fun character. He's kind of over the top with like this zany kind of guy. And of course, like I said, or hinted at, Wesker is back in this one, and he's the big bad. And the final fight with him is actually really, really cool, very fun, and I think very iconic. Some of his lines over the years about exactly what's going on with, the new viruses. So in this game, the virus is known as Ouroboros, and this is where they kind of have this black goo kind of new motif going on, while in Resident Evil 4 it's kind of like this weird, like pincery kind of thing, more similar to like almost a Dead Space, really, which I'm pretty sure Dead Space was inherently inspired by Resident Evil 4, but it's more interesting to see it referenced in 5. And so now the zombies will have this weird black goo which seeps out of them, and it's this really disturbing thing. And then all the main bosses will kind of have this black goo theme about them. Again, this is a very long campaign, but very well padded out. I think this is one of my most replayed games of all time. It is so much fun to play through it, and just with a friend, just go on this huge action, adventure thing for like 6 hours at a time or something. Like, it is just so much fun. It's really hard to understate how much I actually miss this kind of gameplay, and how much Resident Evil 6 really missed the ball in terms of making a sequel to this. It's kind of crazy how good this game is looking back at it. And the way that Capcom is going, it looks like we're going to get a bunch of remakes of all the old Resident Evil games, so I'm really excited to see this game return. There are some interesting strategies, because I believe the Ouroboros thing is afraid of the light. If you use a flash grenade, it'll immediately kill any of the mutated versions of it that there are. There's also a very creepy boss that, again, is made of all this black goo, and it basically, is almost unstoppable, and you have to, lead it into this giant furnace pit, similar to Resident Evil 4. Of course, there are collectibles and little, trinkets and things you can find, in this game that you can use up for selling. Unfortunately, the famous merchant is not returned in this game. However, you just have a general store where you just buy things, and there's no NPC interface. again, looking back at this game, it just really boggles my mind how they made such an amazingly seamless, well-made co-op experience and then just never anything remotely close to this again. I find it like just very strange, honestly, because this game was really, really good, and it definitely like the game I maybe played more than I should have, frankly. I think maybe because I really don't want to talk about it, and I don't really want to do a review of it, but Resident Evil 6 is something where, I picked it up and I played it and I just thought this just feels wrong. And it was so wrong, of course, that Resident Evil 7 was a complete backtrack to a first-person perspective horror theme rather than action, even though it was more kind of action-y. So, I mean, it's so weird because Resident Evil 6 was also, I believe, co-op, and I was playing through it, and, it was a weird thing because I wanted that, initial horror experience and then jump into action. So at the beginning of Leon's campaign, you're in this university or this school, and then suddenly everyone's infected, and you kind of have to, slowly go through the place. But that lasts only maybe like 10 minutes, and immediately you're in an action like zone. Like the entire aspect of the game is that Leon can sprint and dive and like land on the ground, and so it's super action oriented and just totally different in terms of the tone it's going for, and it's very, very, very interesting to see it because it's not something I expected at all. And aside from that, the story just kind of felt all over the place. Like it kind of felt almost like the Avengers, where suddenly they're going to China and Hong Kong, and they're going to all these different countries, and it has Leon and Chris and everyone. And it feels like the scope was just way too big. And I was just playing it, and I was thinking, I'm just not actually having fun. And this just feels a little bit just out of control, just a little bit too much. And I don't know, it did not have a direct feeling. Like Resident Evil 4, we are in, quote unquote, Europe, Spain. Resident Evil 5, we are in Africa. And, it just has a very distinct, vibe to it where, it starts out slow and ramps up, quickly or slowly. And Resident Evil 6, like Resident Evil 6, right out the gate, it's telling you, hey, this is an action game. We're so cool. This is going to happen. All these things are going to blow up, but this is crazy. And the pacing and everything just felt off. And if it became just another generic action game, it wasn't interesting enough to really keep my attention. Again, I think the last thing I need to mention about this game is the infamous, moniker that gave Chris Chris Boulder Punch Redfield. So the final aspect of this game, which is kind of almost the conclusion or the seeming conclusion of the whole Wesker series fight, is that you basically fight Wesker in this giant volcano. But yeah, essentially, one person, if you're playing as Sheva, will be being attacked by Wesker, and what Chris will be doing on the other end is you have to do this quick time event mini game where Chris, like, he's so jacked, he literally punches a boulder which rolls down and like defeats Wesker or creates a bridge. It's the most ridiculous segment I've ever seen in a video game, where it literally took me out of the experience because of how ridiculous it looked for this guy just to be punching a boulder over and over and over again. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much Resident Evil 5. Looking back, when I played it at the time, I thought it was great, but looking back at it now, it's honestly kind of a masterpiece. It's just such a really well-made, fun game that I've played way more than any game I've ever played ever. It is so much fun to play through with a friend and just an absolute blast, especially when you have all the weapons. Anyway, guys, that's all I have to say about it right now. I love this game, and I hope it gets a lot of love. I will see you guys later. Bye.